Welcome back to the Altcoin Season Tour, Episode 5. Once again, I am your host, Raphael, the founder and owner of Flipping Finance, the Gen Z financial media entertainment page. And this is, we have in the studio here with us a very wonderful person, Kaspa Silver, my brother from another mother. How are you doing today? Go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience, man, so that we can just catch up on this.
Yeah, so my name is Kaspa Silver. I'm the owner of the Kaspa Silver YouTube channel. I discovered Kaspa back in 2023, and then once I learned more about it, I realized that it's something that I couldn't ignore. So I decided to start looking for content on YouTube, and basically the content was very trash in my opinion. So I decided to start making a lot of content that I would actually find more valuable for the community. And you're probably familiar with like Bitcoin University, um, heavy Bitcoin
Yeah,
Maxi.
yeah.
So my channel is pretty much inspired off of him. I've watched a ton of his content. He makes a lot of good content, and then a lot of content, of course, I would disagree with. But yeah, ever since 2023, I've just started the channel and then just been educating people about Caspa and what it can actually present to humanity, which I think is something that shouldn't be ignored.
Absolutely. Man, I've seen your content. I've been familiar with your channel for not very long, but honestly, it's actually very great. And now that you mentioned the Bitcoin University thing, I think we could just joke a little bit and say your channel is a fork of the Bitcoin University page. But that's
Yeah, I was
love it,
close
man.
to
Absolutely
almost.
wonderful stuff you do.
Yeah, I was close to almost doing Caspa University, but I was like, that would be a little bit too much of a jab, so I didn't take that route.
Yeah. Absolutely. No one will even notice, the similarities if they're not familiar because you put so much originality to the way you deliver your stuff. I love the consistency in design that you put in the videos. Everything is just so coherent. Everything just flows in a way that's, I really like. So before we begin the conversation, I just want to say there's two parts to this conversation. The first part is what I would consider like a soft debate, and the second part is a conversation because the debate is generally inspired by some of the most echoed sentiments against Caspa, right? By the broader Bitcoin's community, which I am of course a part of. I'm a Litecoin believer, so you know. Just based off of this, and then we go into a conversation where we talk about, Caspa in general, and you get to, explain some things to us. Even go ahead and dispel some common meats, right? I have some other Q&As that I'd like you to just help clear the air about. So what you think about that?
Yeah, that sounds great. I'm game for that. Let's do it.
Awesome, man. Awesome. So to begin the conversation, I just like you to go ahead and explain to the audience just briefly what Caspa is, and then I'll do the same about Litecoin.
Yeah, so Caspa is Aramaic. The name Caspa was chosen because it's reference for an Aramaic word that means money or silver. So naturally, Caspa did adopt the digital silver narrative. Now, I think I should just break that down. The digital silver narrative is something that's like misunderstood within the Caspa community, I think. The whole point of the silver narrative is mainly to address the fact that if you want to call yourself digital silver, your blockchain should be heavier than Bitcoin's. So you should be used more than Bitcoin, not less. And so the goal for Caspa and the goal for that narrative is simply the fact that the goal for Caspa is to be the most used proof of work in the world. So in doing that, that's pretty much the only reason for the narrative. I don't really know why like everyone else wants to take like the approach of like, oh well, the only reason for silver was because of like the visibility and stuff like that. I think the digital silver, digital gold narratives are very limiting to these networks because at the end of the day, they're technologies and they are programmable and they can do a whole lot more things than uh, what the physical world and silver and gold can do. So the narratives I think should not be kind of like gun ho about. They're just to kind of represent a goal, and that's just Caspa being the most used proof of work in the world. Um, Caspa, the reason why it is so unique is because of the DAG. You can actually see it behind me right now. That is the visualization of the DAG right now. It's currently operating at 10 blocks per second, which is 6,000 times faster than Bitcoin. And I don't know the exact math for Litecoin, but I know Litecoin's blocks are only 2.5 minutes. So Caspa does 10 blocks every single second. This allows for a whole lot more scalability. It allows for a whole lot more decentralization because more blocks means that there's a higher chance for a miner to find a block if they're solo mining. So that means solo mining on Caspa is not lottery mining. It is something you can naturally do, and you can consistently find blocks and never have to join a pool. So that's why Caspa is actually a lot more decentralized than all the other proof of works basically in the space. And then you have the confirmation times, which are about 10 seconds on average, but it's practically internet speeds, transferring funds from each other. But since Caspa is a lot more scalable proof of work, and it doesn't have to sacrifice on security or decentralization, it actually goes beyond just storing and transferring wealth. It enables users to communicate, send text messages to each other on the base layer. We also have a platform that is basically like a X competitor, pretty much a social media platform that's all built on the Caspa network. Every single post is a transaction on the network, and it kind of just goes on for there. And then the goal, of course, is to introduce smart contracts capabilities to enable stablecoin support and all the kind of stuff to actually be able to compete with projects like Solana or Ethereum. And so, yeah, that's pretty much like a quick overview of Caspa.
That's absolutely fantastic. Just gonna say, really exciting stuff that Casper's doing and has been doing. I'm gonna commend you guys for that. So what is Litecoin? Litecoin is the first successful altcoin, and this is actually demonstrable by the fact that of all the altcoins that were created during the Bitcoin era, the Namecoin, Tenebricks, Fairbricks, Litecoin remains the only one of those bunch that is still alive and healthy today. The network has continued to grow consistently and predictably over time. And it has just remained an SI unit of resilience in the proof of work space because, Litecoin has endured some of the worst, few years when it comes to general crypto perception, the public perception. However, the blockchain continues to rise and grow in strength, thanks to some things that I'm going to get into much later as, it continues to prove its resilience. So it is a fork of the Bitcoin chain, and it was created by Charlie Lee, an MIT graduate. So the idea behind Litecoin initially was to create, you know, a version of Bitcoin that is actually better fitted for everyday commerce. And I believe that Litecoin has, in fact, been able to deliver on this initial purpose due to the fact that the fees remain insanely low. Even on the base layer, the fees are less than a penny. And on Lightning, is even like the fees are even 1,000 times um, lower than that of Bitcoin on Lightning. So that's actually, pretty incredible. I believe that is the most important characteristic that is necessary for a coin to be considered, you know, um, usable as a medium of exchange, like silver. And so it's been doing really good on that. And Litecoin has been experiencing some very incredible organic growth on the network, right? It's been gaining a lot of transactions. Since the founder completely divested in 2017, we're around about 10,000 transactions per day, somewhere about that back then. And right now, we're somewhere around 200,000 transactions per day. And this is just the organic growth of the network, independent of any sort of external effort from any VCs or founders or anything like that. And that just, further speaks to the resilience of this coin that is generally overlooked by people. We have one of the most passionate communities, and our communities actually share something, besides just the tussle for the digital silver tag. Um, in common, the fact that we're incredibly passionate people, to the point of religiosity, I can say. And that's actually very fantastic, because it makes both communities feel like home, like family. I mean, it definitely does. I'd assume it definitely does feel like a family, when you're with your Casper peeps. And it does in fact feel like a family when I'm, in conversation with my fellow Litecoiners. So it's just a little breakdown on what Litecoin is. So I'm gonna go ahead and say something I like about Caspa, and then you go ahead and say something you like about Litecoin to just soften the mood before we begin this debate. You like that?
Yeah, we can do that. Do you want to go first, or
Ab-
I'll go?
Oh yeah, I go first. I go first.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So what I love about Caspa is the fact that Caspa has continued to push through so much hate and negativity, which is something that I see any single coin that is just coming after the proof of work pie that Bitcoin is sitting on. There's just so much hate and so much backlash towards that coin. And Litecoin has in fact faced that, considering the fact that even, which is absurd, right? Because we're not even trying to compete with Bitcoin, but I see that happening to Caspa, and it continues to push forward. And there's a very resilient community, very passionate supporters, and very highly intellectual people like yourself that are representing the community in a way that I feel like is very incredible. So that's something that I really like about Caspa.
Yeah. I haven't engaged too much with the Litecoin community, only a couple times because some people attacked the Gaspa community. So it's been like I kind of had to dive in a little bit. But it is just nice to see that there is a proof of work chain that has lasted this long and does at least value peer-to-peer digital cash, and value the fact that the whole point of this is to actually have a currency that we use in our daily lives, and not necessarily just have like something that's a pet that we just hold on to and never actually interact with in our daily life. So it is nice to see that there are a lot of people in the proof of work community that want to continue the mission that I think was Bitcoin's original intention, but of course seems to have kind of lost its way.
Absolutely. That's very fantastic. Thanks for those kind words for the Litecoin community. So, for the debate part of this conversation, the question that I used to begin it is: do you think Caspa can be considered a trustworthy store of value like Bitcoins, right? Bitcoins, and by Bitcoins I mean Bitcoin chains that have actually proven themselves, like Bitcoin, Litecoin, you know, and Zcash. I mean, Zcash in a way is a Bitcoin chain. But yeah, particularly Bitcoin and Litecoin, the big two. And the reason why I'm asking this question is because based on the prevalent consensus, right? Some of the points that are often being parroted by Bitcoiners like myself, or the fact that you know, uh, Litecoin and Bitcoin have experienced incredible, longevities. I mean, these things have been going on for over a decade now, about 14 years for Litecoin, about 16 years for Bitcoin. And so this long history of very predictable, resilient growth is what has continued to stand for them. And you can see this by virtue of their continued integrations. I mean, whenever there's a new platform trying to introduce some payments, regardless of how all this how much fancy POS coins continue to pop up, left and right, it's always the Bitcoins, the Litecoins, the Ethereums, and the Bitcoin Cash that get integrated first. And we can see what happened with Fidelity, a multi-trillion-dollar asset manager who included Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Litecoin in their, IRAs, cryptocurrency IRAs. Those are the only three coins you can get on a $6 trillion asset manager cryptocurrency IRA like Fidelity. Which I mean, is a nod to the fact of its longevity and resilience. I mean, their emotes is Fidelity's emotes is kind of IRAs, so it's a pretty big deal that I feel like gives a nod to that. And also the fact that on the adoption point, right, the first movers advantage that they've gotten, sort of makes it very difficult for Caspa to be able to catch up. And I don't think that installs a lot of confidence in people wanting to store their value in Caspa, just because they don't see how it's going to catch up. I mean, Bitcoin's already about $1 trillion, and Litecoin's been consolidating very heavily, could pop off any time now. And so that's on the adoption. And the second thing that is often being parroted, and something that I find myself sort of like on the fence with, I mean, I see it, is ossification. And so by ossification, what it means is that at the protocol level, the idea is that money should be ossified. I mean, I don't mind my productivity experiencing some sort of entropy, right? My productivity should experience entropy, but not where I store my productivity, because money is practically a store of energy, store of productivity, a store of value. So I'd really, the concept of it is that, money, the base layer of the monetary system, should be as ossified as possible. Little drama, little changes, and that's been the case with Bitcoin and Litecoin. They've been moving very predictably, very little, if any, changes. Very extremely difficult to change either of them, but it's not been the case for Caspa, rather, because Caspa has sort of left itself open to changes on the main layer, which, I mean, of course, from a technological standpoint, right, it's actually incredible being able to just change the block speeds from about block production speed from about 1 blocks per second before the final crescendo upgrade to about 10 blocks per second now. I mean, on a technological standpoint, that's incredible. But from a monetary standpoint, I feel like people, particularly Bitcoiners like myself, would find that rather troublesome. I mean, we don't really want in our money to just change like that, And this also leads to the final point of what is generally being parroted around as why Casper cannot be trusted at the moment as a store of value, which is its emission schedule. And this is actually subdivided to 2 points, right? The first point about the emission schedule is the fact that, first of all, the Casper emission schedule, feels rushed, right? Casper was created in 2022. At first, the emissions decay had a path that was following, and that was sort of rushed to the point where now we have 96% of Caspas that are going to be in circulation by 2026, which is just 4 years after the chain was launched and mining was allowed. And by comparison, right, I mean, took Bitcoin about 15-16 years to get to 96% emissions. And so the change, and how the fact that it was changed at some point, and I guess the reason that was given for the change in emission schedule by the Caspa core, I guess that's what I'm just going to call them for illustrative purposes, I don't know if that's what they're called, was they're trying to bootstrap the network growth, and just sort of prevent the slow dripping of coins that might frustrate miners and sort of like bootstrap. But it's one of the things, right? When you mess with the emission schedule like that, it sort of like makes people not want to trust that monetary network if it can just change like that. I mean, what's going to happen, right? But the emission schedules of Litecoin and Bitcoin has never been changed ever. And also the fact that this current emission schedule means that all the Caspers will be totally mined by 2042, which I mean, Casper has a very good counter to that, which I'm going to say, I mean, allowing smart contract compatibility. But that sort of forces Casper to figure out how to dominate this field that is very, very, competitive, right? We're talking about VC funded POS coins, like, I mean, BNB, that is sponsored by the largest cryptocurrency exchange in the world. Solana, that is like the behemoth of what can be considered a VC coin, Sui, that has been pumped by very very powerful VCs, and Ton with its billions of users already in Telegram, and some of these other very established, very well funded POS chains, including Ethereum, by the way. And why this might so Casper sort of faces an uphill battle to try to figure out how to dominate that space, with very little funding. Which, I mean, I have a particular project that I used to support, Multiverse X. I still support them. I used to make videos for them, but I still support them. They had very little VC funding. Fully sharded blockchain, one of the most advanced blockchain in the space. Very very wonderful product. But they really struggle to make any mark in that space nowadays. I mean, they were about in the top 20 something before last cycle, but they are not even in the top 120 right now. So it's a very difficult space to compete in, and the current emissions sort of like force Caspar to figure it out in the next decade or couple of decades, how to dominate that very competitive field, or else I guess the miners are left with the options to of either increase changing the emission schedule, or increasing the supply, or just letting the network just die. I guess that's the way it's generally seen. So what do you think about this 3 points, and what are your counters to them?
Yeah, yeah. That's a lot. That's a lot to take in, but I guess to start, like on the store value front, yes, Caspa can be viewed as a store value just because of the fact that it has a max supply. That max supply has never been changed, and it also, of course, you can self custody in your own wallet. You have full control. All the similar attributes that Bitcoin, Litecoin, all the other proof of works have. Kaspa has that too, so it can be considered as a store value because it does keep your self sovereignty. You have full control, and then to kind of address the fact of the development of Kaspa, the development of Kaspa has really not been changed significantly at all. It's pretty much been almost the same amount of times as Bitcoin in its early days, because we do have to remember that Kaspa is in its very very early days, and this is new technology, but the developers behind it have been studying this stuff for a very long time. I didn't mention, but the founder for Kaspa is Jonathan Somplinsky, and he was in the Ethereum white paper. And Vitalik basically used a modified version of Jonathan's original protocol called Ghost, which was supposed to be implemented into Bitcoin during the days where Bitcoiners were a whole lot more open to updating Bitcoin. He proposed the Ghost protocol back in 2013 to basically get Bitcoin to 1 second blocks, but nothing ever came of it. But Jonathan continued to develop more and research more until eventually 2021 is when Caspa launched. About the emission schedule, the emission schedule is something that is always heavily talked about. The security budget, and that's for good reason. It was very very fast, but it was for a very very good reason. The developers did know that adoption rates now today are much much faster than Bitcoin when it came out, or Litecoin when it came out. And so back in those days, you needed to have a very slow emission schedule to basically enable the miners to stick around and to keep mining, to make money, and to kind of keep bootstrap the community. So instead of doing a very slow emission schedule, instead the decision was to basically emit a lot more very fast in the early days to prevent ASICs from basically taking over the network and getting the entire supply. Because Caspa
Hmm.
launched exactly like Bitcoin and Litecoin, I believe, when it started with CPU mining. So you had CPU mining, then GPU mining, and then of course you get FGPAs and then ASICs that come online. And so the idea behind that was to prevent the ASIC companies from quickly finding Caspa and then getting ASICs built out, and then they're mining all the coins, and then all the coins would be centralized. So this decision was actually very smart because ASICs came online at about 70% of the supply being released. which some of the developers would say that was still too early. They wish it was later, but Caspa was never against ASICs. I think being ASIC resistant is not a smart idea. I think XMR just kind of showed us why ASIC resistance isn't really the best, because there's always a way, especially there's always a way to make better hardware. And then especially with GPUs, if you're like just GPU or CPU only, there is always more CPUs and GPUs out there than there are miners for a specific coin. So you can kind of see what happened with XMR, where you just had another chain basically collude to get together and try to start attacking XMR and start mining most of the blocks. This is much more difficult with ASICs, because ASIC companies um, basically create the ASICs. They mine first, then they release, and then you can't just buy an ASIC off the shelf anywhere. It's just there's a lot less in circulation, so it just creates a more resilient network. So there was no reason for Caspa to be ASIC resistant, especially the amount of speeds that it's going to be operating with. You need to have the greatest hardware backing that. So ASIC was the choice, and a lot of people don't know, but we had a Marathon Digital Mining, which is the biggest Bitcoin miner, decided to start mining Caspa. So if
Oh wow.
to, just to think about that, like if Caspa had a slower emission and Marathon Mining Digital discovered Caspa, they could have been way earlier mining the entire supply. But thankfully, because of that fast emission schedule, they got in, and now they only got like 20% of the supply to play with when they finally joined the network, to try and mine and compete with. So um, the fast emission schedule is for very, very good reason, and I think it's playing out really well. We've seen ASICs come quickly, and because of that fast emissions, it's prevented ASIC dominance of the supply. Um, so that was the reason for that. And then to kind of go on with the development phases, there has only been two major hard forks for Caspa. The first one was because of a bug that was discovered after 2 weeks of mainnet launch, and of course they had to fix that bug. And they basically, during that time, they told there was issues with the nodes where they weren't syncing, and they basically told the miners to stop mining if they can, to be able to basically fix the network. And then during a period of time, there was only one person mining on the network, and he publicly disclosed the address that he was mining to. And the community had a choice whether or not to keep the supply for future development or burn it. The community chose to burn that supply. So there's like 10, 11 million Caspa that's burned forever. And that's kind of like a testament to the openness of the community and how it's very like democratic, where like there's people are voting for what to kind of happen. It's not just like a single group of people just making all the decisions. And then the development process is the same as any other proof of work chain. You got any updates that are proposed are not forced on anyone. It's all voluntary. You have to update your node if you want to agree to anything that's proposed. And then at the end of the day, what matters the most is the block producing nodes. Are the miners, are they updating to whatever is being proposed, to whether or not really make a change in the network? Um, so there's that with Caspa. And then one of the other things you had brought up, I'm trying to recall, was the smart contract issue. How Caspa basically has to operate and trying to figure out something right now to kind of compete in that, which is true. But the main one of the main reasons why Caspa took this fast emission approach is because the developers knew what they were bringing to the table was something so revolutionary for the space that it would just make sense for adoption to kind of kick in, which we've been seeing heavily happen, because of the benefits that Caspa gives over proof of stake chains. So like in the smart contract world, there's something called MEV, which is miner extractable value, which was changed to maximum extractable value due to the fact that Ethereum went to proof of stake. But That's the reason why that even exists is because of slow block production, and because of slow block production, basically malicious actors could see what's already coming before it ever gets into the network, and then basically kind of like front run you and steal funds from people. Well, because of Caspa's fast block production, there's already an MEV resistant kind of baked into the protocol already without even introducing other types of things to try to prevent that. And so that's very valuable for a lot of smart contract platforms, because when you have a network that is not MEV resistant, a user experiencing that malicious attack can kind of try to put the blame on the project or whatever they're on and say like, why is this happening to me? But the user doesn't even realize it's actually a fault of the protocol that they're using themselves. So with Caspa, you just have that really great benefit with the fact with faster blocks means that you're highly more resistant to MEV attacks. So there's that. And then on top of that, we already have smart contracts that did launch on Caspa just like last week. And it's a layer two solution for smart contracts, which is made by a third party called Casplex. They wanted to build this on Caspa. And since because it's permissionless, they can go ahead and do that. But it's EVM compatible. And so people have the ability to basically port over Ethereum smart contracts onto Caspa's layer two and basically start interacting with the Caspa network. Now, I'm not really a huge fan of that implementation because to me it appears to be very centralized in nature. So not a huge fan. There's risks to that. With like anything in the smart contract world, it always kind of introduces centralization. So really, what we're waiting for are the innovation of smart contracts, something called vprogs that's going to be coming soon, that's being developed, and that's supposed to be like a base layer execution of smart contracts, which would make a smart contract system basically rely on the base layer itself. So that means it inherits all of Caspa's wonderful security, fast transaction processing, and just would basically just make it a powerhouse to really start compete with other smart contract platforms. And then, when it comes to just battling for adoption and the other players that are already out there, it's just a matter of time. It's not really. I don't think Cas was lacking anything to compete with them, other than the fact that we just need time so that certain things develop, so that it can become more competitive, and then people just getting more awareness of Caspa, which we've been seeing, an influx of Caspa just being mentioned in a lot more places than usual. We already have the Bitcoin community kind of like attacking us like every single day now. For some reason, they tend to want to attack Caspa specifically, but I think it's just a testament to what Caspa is and how it's truly viewed to Bitcoiners as a much more bigger threat to Bitcoin, in my opinion. Just because of the fact of what it presents to the world and how the fact that layer twos on Caspa are not something that's a necessity for me to use my funds. I don't need Lightning to be able to use my Caspa instantaneously, pretty much, and to be able to not have to have long wait times or get less in fees. I can just use Caspa on the base layer itself, and it can operate exactly for what I need. And this is just what makes Caspa so versatile, because it basically just operates and is designed to meet the need of users' needs and ask. So, if you want smart contracts, Caspa can do that. If you want to text people on Caspa, you could do that. If you want a social media platform, you can do that. If you want to just store your wealth, Caspa can do that too. So it's just very versatile, to basically attract all walks of life, but ultimately, just being a superior digital sound hard money for the world, that can actually be used, can't be censored, and also the main topic for proof of work is that security budget. And Caspa, in my opinion, just has one of the best chances to actually solve the security funding issue because of its scalability and its ability to attract massive use on the network. People, the having cheap fees isn't something so much to be proud about, in my opinion, just because of the fact that the block reward isn't there forever. And so at one point, these networks have to completely rely on massive use to be able to fund the security budget. And with that comes the ability to be able to scale, because if you can't scale, then the fees would need to be extremely high to be able to match the need of that security budget. And with Caspa, it just can continuously scale, and be able to meet the masses and not have to sacrifice on decentralization or security to be able to do that. So currently, Caspa put in a world record of 60 million transactions on the base layer, which would, most proof of work barely ever hit 2 million. I think Litecoin has only ever hit like close to 2 million in a single day. But Caspa has the world record beaten for proof of work networks to be able to do 60 million on the base layer, just with no hiccups at all. Just handle it like a champ. So, um, to me, it doesn't make sense to me to basically be looking into the other proof of work networks anymore, because it kind of makes them very redundant. Because Caspa basically is just a complete new paradigm for proof of work, and I think it has its own first mover advantage in that saying, this is how you should proof of work. This is how you should do things now. Um, it's no longer blockchain. So that's pretty much my thoughts on Caspa and its direction for the future.
That's incredible. And first, I'm gonna commend, like I said, Casper's really doing a lot of things on the tech front, and I feel like that's actually very great, right? I've been following what they've been doing, because I knew when the crescendo update happened and block speed went from 1 second per block to 10 seconds per block. I think that's actually incredible. And to give Casper a prop, I'm gonna say honestly, the fact that the MEV problem that Solana has, right? Because a very huge problem with Solana, where they're pretty much robbing their users of millions of dollars. I feel like being able to solve that, Casper being able to solve that, I think that that's actually quite incredible. Because it's very good for users, protections and all that. However, you mentioned a few things, and I just want to just talk about them. And the first one was that when talking about why Casper is a store of value, you said Casper has a max supply and it is self custody. So it's a store of value. And what I would just ask is, I never said it's not a store of value, right? I mean, if I said Casper is not a store of value, then all the rebuttals you can make against that is just transfer me some Casper and I convert it to value. I mean, XRP is a store of value, right? It's $100 billion max supply as well, and it definitely is representative. It definitely represents value if I transfer it to you right now. But what I was talking about was, is it a reliable store of value at the moment? And a lot of this is contingent on adoption and its history, right? Not really what it can do or what it could do tomorrow. And that was what is, I mean, can it be trusted long term? If I want to put money inside it, right? The points I mentioned, the 3 points I mentioned, which are um the problems that Casper faces with the adoption not being there, and the fact that like the base one layer is not ossified enough to sort of give me that confidence that nothing's going to change about my money, and also the fact that the emission schedule sort of forces it to have to win the smart contracts race as soon as possible. I feel like, yeah, so those are the things that are the concerns about whether or not it can be trusted as a store of value, a good store of value, and not whether or not it's a store of value. And you mentioned that Vitalik name drop Jonathan, which I feel is incredible, but I just do not see its relevance to why Kaspa should be considered anything. Honestly, I feel like Kaspar's Kasper fans, like, I feel like you people are better off, without it, because like there's a whole lot more to Caspa than just that. And I feel like I really like the fact that a lot of what's happening in Caspa is happening away from the fanfare of what the founders are doing. And I feel like that's what any good store of value should be looking for, rather than, oh, they name dropped us here and there. It should just be contingent on what the chain is doing independently. And so I feel like I don't see how that's you know relevant. So yeah, what do you have to say, particularly to my point that can it be trusted as a store of value? And maybe maybe I should just give you the chance to address this point one by one, so you can just counter them and we could just move on. And the first one is the fact that it doesn't have the longevity to to sort of like show that users install confidence, right, instill confidence in the heart of someone who wants to store their productivity in it, right? Because I mean, if I want to store my value in something, right, I'm not thinking about 20x, right? There are different crowds, number grow up crowd, and then there's those that just I come from a country that inflation is a real thing here, right? It's a very real thing. It happens in real time. So cryptocurrency for me, and Bitcoin and Litecoin for me, is a way to just store my productivity consistently over time. I don't care if it goes up quick. I mean, I'll be happy if it does. So and one of the things that gives me that confidence in Litecoin is the adoption history. Having decades of it just growing consistently, and same with Bitcoin. But Casper doesn't have that, so that's the first one. So what you have to say, particularly to that?
Yeah, so um the relevance of like name dropping that is just to kind of give a little bit more background into showing someone that Caspa didn't just spawn out of nowhere. Because when I was doing my first initial research and I found it was very crazy to me that it had no ICO, no VCs, fair launch. Okay, cool. That's probably existed many times in proof of work networks that I've tried to attempt that over the past. Um, but what's something significant about this? Well, every single project, we can't get away from the fact that these projects have developers behind them. We that even though you know they're supposed to be neutral, which they still are, but they have developers behind them, and I think it kind of just gives a testament to, oh, like Caspo's actually been practically worked on for the last 10 years. Like it's not something that just spawned out of nowhere. It's been a process of research and dedicated time being spent to come up with a system that could actually improve proof of work, because that's the thing. A lot of these other proof of work hard forks are not really improving proof of work. They're changing a little update here and there, and then they're kind of saying like, hey, we're a little bit faster and we're a little bit better. But Caspa actually innovates like things all around for when it comes to scalability, when it comes for mining, and so much more. So that's pretty much like the relevance of that. It just gives it a little bit more merit that it's not just spawned out of nowhere, didn't just come from nothing. It's something that is a result of 10 years worth of already done research. So that gives trust in the fact that, okay, the people that are developing this network aren't just like noobs or something like that. They're well versed people in the space. They know what they're doing, and we just can't get away from the developers. I mean, because if that was true, then Bitcoin wouldn't be having this whole like civil war right now between core and knots, because of the fact that you can't get away from the developers. They still are going to develop and they're going to propose changes, and the people at the end of the day always have control of those changes because it's still voluntary. If they propose an update, they're not forcing anyone to update. You get to choose in that. Um, so that's pretty much like the relevance kind of there. And then, you know, to me, I can kind of kind of ask you, your founder sold all of his coins. And I know the reason for why he sold all of his coins was because he felt that he was having too much an effect on the price. Um, but to me, I just think that If he believes Litecoin is a store of value, he wouldn't have done that. I mean, he would have. I mean, it just he should have stuck to his gun and been like, Litecoin is neutral. At the end of the day, yes, I created it, but it doesn't really mean much because it's neutral. Anyone could mine when I started mining, and anyone could start buying it once the exchanges. It wasn't. It was all fair. So but I know that's like a common attack point for Litecoiners. Kind of just mentioned the fact that he sold all his coins. What does that mean? But he's still sticking around. I see him sticking around, and he's trying to introduce Litecoin Foundation, treasury companies now, and stuff like that. So that's all great and good. But like I said, Marathon Digital Mining, the biggest Bitcoin miner, has never mined any other coin. They never mined Litecoin. They never mined Bitcoin Cash. They chose to mine Kaspa. So that right there is already a testament that a big company that's one of the biggest mining Bitcoin companies decided to look into Kaspa and start mining it. And not only that, BlackRock, holds like a good percentage of Marathon mining. So whether or not BlackRock realizes it or not, they're already having some exposure to Kaspa, and that's a testament that you know you kind of just can't ignore Kaspa. When once these players see it, they do their research, they do their due diligence, they can't ignore it. And then we can also just look at the normal stats of transactions over time and the addresses over time. That has been consistently growing over time. I think for the last like 4 days, Kaspa's consistently been doing 1 million transactions a day, which is more than Bitcoin, Litecoin, Bitcoin Cash. More than all the other proof of work networks. Pretty much, it's been consistently doing 1 million a day. So that just shows that there is growth trajectory. The hash rate, of course, has been growing. If we're looking at the emissions per day, Kaspa, I believe, is still the third biggest proof of work in terms of providing funds for miners. It's either the third or fourth, either below Litecoin or just above Litecoin, in terms of revenue that miners are creating daily. The hash rate has also exploded. We're seeing a consistent growth in the hash rate. Of course, just like anything, like just like the price, how it can explode and then it needs to correct. I think we saw the same thing in the hash rate. We had a lot of FOMO because Caspa was the best proof of work to mine for about a year, and so we had a lot of FOMO in mining, and it kind of caused a huge peak in the price and a huge peak in that hash rate, and those things needed to correct. But so far, I mean, just looking at the history of Kaspa, I've never seen a coin, a proof of work coin at least, come out and have such a beautiful growth trajectory and a lot of different metrics. And then even just looking like in the price, for example, if you're doing like the Bitcoin versus Kaspa price as well, it was consistently outperforming Bitcoin for its first like 2 years. And then we're now seeing a correction, which is normal by all these kind of coins. Like they never just going to keep going up forever. So I believe also it's been studied that Kaspa was the first, one of the fastest coins to reach 1 billion market cap as well. So there's just a lot of metrics that outside of just like looking at the devs that of course are showing me that yep, this is something that has some longevity to it. There's people always building on it. There's tons of developers doing different things for it. So there's just always new things happening for Kaspa. And if you just tune into my news videos, you can see how there's just constantly something happening, something building, some event happening here. And so, there's a lot of good signs that Kaspa is not going to go away. The people who are trying to like mock it and whatever is not going to make it disappear. I think it's here to stay, just like the other proof of work networks that in my opinion, I think like something like Ethereum Classic is pretty worthless in my opinion. Like I'm not really sure the point of that network to kind of stick around, since it is just like the remaining remains of Ethereum when it hard forked, but it's still around. And so if these networks that I think are not really bringing much new to the table anymore, they're kind of just trying to stick around, can do that. I think something like Kaspa that just provides a lot more versatility to the world is going to be here to stay and has a lot of longevity to it.
That's incredible. Like I said earlier, I do like all of the wonderful developments. I have been seeing some of the incredible development that have been happening. I mean, you guys had the Node in Africa announcement thing not very long ago, which is incredible. Like I said, Casper is doing a lot of great stuff on the tech side. That is undeniable. And I do appreciate the fact that I appreciate your justification of why you mentioned Ethereum's founder Vitalik name dropping, Jonathan, and I do see your point in that. I mean, it's pretty much the same with when Bitcoiners try to say, "Oh, Bitcoin had its immaculate conception," and just all of the memetics around Satoshi just leaving everything. So I mean, yes, that's a good meme factor for Caspa, and I get it. The lure is actually important to every money, right? I mean, there are lures and things that sort of like create this perceptional value in the minds of people about money. So that's actually good. If I get you correctly, the SOV prospect. I mean, why I as a person trying to store my value in something that I believe should be reliable. Why I should store it in Litecoin, in Caspa, is because the SOV prospects I should be looking at, should be contingent on its active network development as opposed to the years of resilience and provability of things like Bitcoin and Litecoin. Is that correct?
I mean, well, I mean, like it's hard to. I mean, it's both of those things, but it's gonna take time before Caspa can compete in that aspect, which is just that's just the natural. Like these things always have a birth date, you know. So like every single day that Caspa operated and survived and didn't crash is another day that just added to the clock of this is resilient, it works, it's doing what it said it's going to do, there's no issues. So it's both of those things, you know. It's and it's the same for every other network, you know. Litecoin, every day it continues to grow. You know, Bitcoin has a hedge over it in terms of that it was first, but I don't think being first really means much. There's a lot of things that were first in the world, especially when it comes to technology. And at the end of the day, these things are really mainly technologies. Um, and just because you're first really does not guarantee you anything. And if that was the case, then like things like gold will never be surpassed by Bitcoin. And Bitcoiners firmly believe that it will. But I mean, gold is first in its store value. It's been around thousands of years, way longer than Bitcoin ever has. So I think, you know, being first and that kind of argument isn't really, it doesn't really hold much water. And also the fact that Caspa is a first to do many things that all these other proof of work networks have never done. You know, Caspa is the first to have 10 blocks per second. Caspa is the first to uh, operate and do 60 million transactions in a day on a proof of work network. Caspa is the first to have solo mining be such a possibility on a proof of work network. So I think Caspa is creating its own standards, you know, and it's first to its own things, and that's what just sets it apart from every other proof of work in the space.
That's great. You mentioned that it's both of those things, right? It's both the great tech and the resilience. And trying to buttress your point about resilience, you said it can have those, right? I mean, everything has a birth point. Eventually, it has those. But we're talking about now. We're not talking about later, right? And that's the importance of why you would, if you wanted to do something, because from my conversations with you so far, you're an incredibly rational person, right? If you were going to go on a ride, let's say you're going to fly from Brazil to Thailand to go enjoy the weather, just imagine, are you gonna imagine you've got two options, right? You've got a Boeing 747 proven technology over the last 100 and over the last 40 years resilient, or this brand new cutting edge technology that is very great, very promising, but hasn't really stood the test of time. I mean, considering the fact that and has had some little bumps along its not so long history, because and I can sort of link that to what, like I said earlier, the emission schedule of Caspa was hastened, right? And that's something that could really mess with people's perception of how they can trust it as money. And these are things that are not very long ago. And also the fact that a lot of it is very contingent on how fast Casper can like dominate the smart contracts race. And so these bumps, right, it's obviously logical to see that one would rather pick the Boeing force 747 that has been very, very historically reliant, right? It's been the standard. People have used it and nobody has ever died using it, as a way to travel rather than this new cutting edge. I mean, of course, there would always be zealots and like tech and people that are very optimistic who are generally in an adoption curve, right? Those are always the first adopters, and I believe you're one of those, the brave ones, who are smart enough to see the potential and are courageous enough to go on that ride. But for the average Joe like me, I'm just an average Joe, right? I'm not really very well versed about the technology of all of these things. And I'm more inclined to following along with it in relation to storing my value. And the way people generally store their values, it's very, very similar to how they would trust a flight, because I mean I'm much I want security, like I said before. My productivity, my businesses, my salaries, these things can experience entropy. I don't care. But where I want to store my value, my investments, right, I'll most likely put it in the S&P 500. It's not flashy, but I don't want my value on that roller coaster. Of course I can apportion some of it to some things that are more exciting. And but generally I'll just want the representation of my productivity to grow in a way that I can actually trust. And that's what I mean by Casper just hasn't gotten there yet. And that's not to say it's not going to get there. Of course there's a lot of bumps on the road, a lot of bumps ahead, but that doesn't mean anything, right? I'm just talking about for now. It's just not there on the historical reliability front. However, I mean, there are some people that would consider it a good store of value by virtue of the technological advancements that it's provided so far. And that's actually great. That's valid. Who's to say someone shouldn't store consider that as their criteria for what they should store their value? Who's to set the standards and benchmark in an empirical way? But however, like most people, most everyday Joes like me are gonna still fall back to what has that history of not dying, as opposed to a rather small pie of tech and technology enthusiasts that are going to want to take that higher risk on Casper. But I feel like that's great, as well. And then you did say that I said being first means anything, but it's not really about being first, right? It's not about being first. It's about my perception while looking at these things. Doesn't matter which came first. I mean, I'm not gonna go put my money in Tenebricks. It came first. It came Tenebricks, Fairbricks. They came first before Litecoin. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter for anything. Right. I'm gonna put my money in Caspa before I put my money in Tenebricks. Of course, it came Tenebricks coming first doesn't mean anything. So what just matters is the resilience over that time, and particularly with Litecoin, the network just continues to grow. Man, when everyone continues to shit on it and everyone continues to talk bad about it, the network just continues to grow and grow and grow. And so that sort of like instills, that confidence in me on that part of it's historical adoption. And so yeah, you did mention that Charlie sold, and I'm very glad that you did in fact clarify that that is a very common slander that people generally employ to discredit Litecoin. And it's pointless in my opinion what the founder of a decentralized open source money does. And I believe you're going to agree with me when I point out not very long ago, right? This was from Bitcoin University when he talked about, I'm just going to show it on my screen real quick, when this was from Jonathan, the founder of Kaspa, where he wrote this Medium post, about Kaspa. And the second reason for why he created Kaspa was, he put, secondly, to make myself rich. Now, in this regard, right, someone who is, has malicious intentions would go ahead and say this, if why would I trust my store of value inside this coin that was created to enrich its founder? But logically speaking, it doesn't mean anything, right? And that's where it falls under, like, the activities of its founders does not matter at all, and especially due to the fact that Charlie did mine his coins, right? There was a cost to the production of those coins that everyone, whoever, I mean, if you took a time machine, you went back then, I mean, that's the, Charlie, he did make a very, very elaborate announcement, about when Litecoin's mining was going to go live, and allowed the community to sort of like decide when, you know and they chose the date. It wasn't, oh, I'm gonna put this date. No, they chose, right? So, and it was everyone that was there at the Bitcoin forum back then, they had the ability to. And so he mined it very fair and square. I don't think it matters anything. So I feel like that falls in a category of like slander that doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, Kaspa, Litecoin is a totally decentralized, open source, monies, and it doesn't matter what the founders think. I mean, there are other opinions that Jonathan does express. I mean, he's very pro-Israel, which I think is great for him, right? I mean, he is someone who grows up in that, who lives in that region. So of course he has a very good opinion about it, to his merit. But that might have negative perceptions for other people. But again, like I said, doesn't matter, shouldn't matter about an open source decentralized proof of work money. And so I guess where we just come to on this is the fact that you've been able to justifiably say that the confidence in Caspa's store of value property, as with regards to its adoption and how people should perceive it, is on contingent to the technological advancements that it's making. And I feel like that's actually great. So I guess when it comes to these things, it's just a matter of you choosing, right? There's a juxtaposition in front of us. Would you rather pick this incredible technology, money that is yet to prove itself, but is very promising and is showing itself to be secure right now? I mean, it has much more promise than Nano and like some other, proof of work coins that are sort of like trying to go after that same problem. Or you want to just store your money in and your productivity in things that are not going to provide any sort of drama for you. And I guess at the end of the day, it's just a matter of taste. But I would think, right, based on general consensus, that majority of people just fall in the basket of average Joes like myself that are going to want to stick to something that is just much more proven and just much more resilient. But again, it's a matter of choice. So the second thing I wanted to talk about is the second point, which is ossification, and I believe you're going to like this one. This ossification, I'm a bit on the fence about it, right? And the idea is ossification of bitcoins, like Bitcoin and Litecoins, make them conceptually reliable. And the protocol layer should not be editable, shouldn't be changed. Casper leaves itself open. And where I sort of like see their point on this, right? Again, like I said, there are two aspects to things being money that are intrinsically inseparable from the coin, right? You can't separate store of value from medium of exchange, but they are conceptually separable, right? I mean, the process of me storing my value is entirely different from the prospect of me exchanging through a medium, right? So exchanging that value for something else, it's a different process. And so in the process of storing my value, I do believe, based on general consensus and what's been happening in history, that ossification is important, because in the process of storing my value, I mean, I'm already facing so much entropy in my productivity. I mean, business goes up, it goes down. Sometimes I make sales, sometimes I don't make sales. There's already so much entropy going on there. I don't want entropy happening with my storing of value. I just want the money to be money. It shouldn't change. I feel that's one the allures of gold, right? And you did mention that gold is in fact that just because gold is being longer doesn't mean it's a better store of value than Bitcoin. But being logical, right? It's a much more reliable store of value than Bitcoin just because of its track record, and that sort of counts for something. So, what I'm just trying to say in essence is the fact that money just stays as money. I don't want to think about my US dollars, transforming into a winged horse and I could fly on it tomorrow. I mean, that's going to be great, right? But I don't think I'm looking forward to that with my paper dollars. And it's the same with Bitcoin, it's the same with Litecoin. And the idea is, ossification sort of like gives one that ability to go to bed and sleep, understanding that the concept of what your value that you're storing is just not going to change overnight. And Caspa, because of its heavy focus on improving the technology, again, which is great, sort of like suffers lacking this ossification, because I mean, today it's payments, tomorrow it's smart contracts, and even besides that, right? I mean, the emission schedule was moved, was rushed, right? It was changed. The emission decay was improved to make emissions happen much faster. Which if you look at that, right, it's not very ossified. And then you have the just some other things like that. So that's the point of ossification. So what's your counter on that?
Yeah, so like the emission schedule wasn't necessarily changed. It was always, the plan was always to be rapid. Like, so like that was the plan at the start, to be a rapid emission schedule. So it wasn't like just it wasn't like slow and then they just sped it up. It was always rapid to start, and then it's been that way ever since. So the emission schedule is totally ossified in the fact that that's never been tampered with. The only way you can kind of say it's sort of been tampered with is because in the early days, the emission schedule was created in a way to be randomized. So it was basically like when you found a block, it was a random amount of Caspa, not a specific amount of Caspa, just to kind of bootstrap the community and not and get it started. But in 2 weeks, that bug happened, which then caused the hard fork to fix that bug, and then that's when they basically just finalized it to just keep it at 500 Caspa per block, set it like that, and then continue it all the way down to where it is today, decreasing every single month, having a halving every single year. That's been the case since the 2 weeks after launch, and that's just normal in any early technology to face some kind of like issue. Bitcoin had a bug in its early days where someone was able to inject over billions of coins into supply in the very early days. They had to release a update for that. If you did not update, you would eventually be forked off because there were certain aspects to that update that would need you to be compatible, or else you would basically eventually not even be part of the network. So it was kind of like a soft fork, but still it required you to update at the end of the day. So it's these technologies are not like be able to kind of prevent itself from ever having these kind of issues. It's in Bitcoin. It's in Bitcoin now with Core 30. People are literally saying that Bitcoin's going to die if Core 30 gets launched. So this idea that like, oh, like, Bitcoin never changes, like it's just not true. Like it has had changes, it has updates that could affect certain things, certain perceptions. No coin is actually free from experience that. But the point of the matter of those things is the fact that the free market has the choice. And for Caspa, at least, we have excellent consensus in Caspa. And so we don't have any issues amongst the changes, which there has only been one actual hard fork change, besides of the bug. The bug is something you have to fix. But the actual one change is the fact that we just increased the block production, which benefits everybody. I don't know why anyone would not want to be at 10 blocks per second when it literally lets you solo mine, where you no longer have to rely on pool, which that's something that all other proof of work networks have to always rely on, which increases their centralization. Because if you're reliant on a pool, those pools are the ones who control the block production. And the miners have to connect to those pools to actually make income. Whereas if they were to solo mine, that's a lottery game. You know, the odds of you finding a block are so low in these other networks that it's just not viable. In Caspa, that's not the case. So increasing block production literally gives users more power, more decentralization, and then also more throughput. I mean, Caspa is now able to do over 200 million transactions in a day, and it not suffer any kind of hiccups. That's what Caspa can do today. And if you were sleeping and the hard fork happened, um, you would wake up and Caspa would just be operating the same. Literally, you wouldn't even notice the change if you were sleeping and the hard fork happened and you woke up the next day after the hard fork. It was still operational. So the changes have not been anything in any which way changing the fundamental value of Casper, changing like how it functions, what it does, what it can do. It's doing the same thing it was doing in the beginning days, just better. That's pretty much it. These hard forks are done in a very organized, practical way where lots of testing is involved. The community is told to test and to 10 blocks per second on Caspa was being ran on a testnet network for a whole year before it ever got pushed to the main layer to ensure that if this update happens, it's there's not going to be any problems, and there wasn't. So, um, and that just goes to show like the developers behind this, they understand that you should be making sure these things are flawless and seamless as possible, because especially when your coin is in the 2 billions of market cap like Caspa is, you don't want a $2 billion coin to have some kind of interruption like Ethereum had, where they literally like hard forked the network and you had coins that were rolled back so that the hack was rolled back and all that you don't want something like that happening on your network. And so Caspa has never had any of those kind of problems because of the amount of time that goes into doing these changes, the amount of research. It's not just like overnight changes. It's not just like it's updating, oh, another update next week. That's not how Caspa is. It is very predefined changes. Like everyone's aware. You're going to be knowing about it. It's very organized. Everyone's communicating about it. And then when the change happens, like I said, the goal is to literally have people not even realize it, and that's exactly what happened when 10 blocks per second happened. If you weren't informed about 10 BPS, you kind of were just like oh, like Casp was still working for me, because it was really flawless. I have a live stream where I streamed it live when it happened, when it hard forked into not even the hard fork, because one of the cool things about it is that when the hard fork was launched, at the end of the day, you can't force people to update their nodes. So what happened was the hard fork got announced and everyone had 30 days to upgrade. And it was all voluntary for everyone, all the pools, all the miners. They all had a voluntary option. Do you want to upgrade or not upgrade? And no one can control that. So everyone was informing people, and we managed to get over 90% of the blocks to be on the new version, so that after the 30 days, if you were on that version after 30 days, it would then just boom hard fork into 10 BPS at a certain time, at a certain block, at a certain DAA score. So it was very seamless, very flawless. So like the updates are really not a problem for Caspa. We have wonderful consensus, and they are not interrupting the flow of how Caspa is operating for each user. So I think as long as you do things right, it's really a non-issue. And also one more thing, you need to upgrade to continue to adapt to what the world needs if you actually want to adopt the masses, because the goal is to have Casper being used the most. And one of the things with like Litecoin, for example, is right now it's not really able to handle a significant amount of massive use. And if it does end up happening, then it will face the same kind of similar issues to Bitcoin, where the fee market would need to increase very, very high to be able to sustain the miners, especially if the block reward continues to drop. So Caspa having a fast emission and all that, really what Caspa chose to do is not kick the can down the road, because the block reward was not something to be forever. It was something to bootstrap, because the intention was to have enough users. And so Caspa's took the approach to not kick the can down the road, make that issue be something that our grandchildren deal with, or people later deal with. Instead, Caspa's facing it head on, because of the wonderful innovations that it has, that it has a very, very strong ability to be able to face the security budget head on, and solve it, and it not be an issue. And of course, anytime, and if the value of Caspa continues to rise, that only just prolongs how long we have until the security budget becomes an issue. And that's the same for Litecoin, Bitcoin. Bitcoin needs to double every 4 years, which I believe is just not going to be sustainable forever. So eventually they're going to have to start finding use. Litecoin is pretty similar with its block reward. I know it has merge mining with Dogecoin, which is kind of like one of the ways it's actually able to prop itself up with mining, which is Dogecoin, which I don't know. I think that having that as a security prop up kind of thing is a little bit not good, because it is a meme coin that has an infinite supply. It's contingent on someone saying something like Elon Musk. And, if one day Elon Musk kind of like starts to tweet negatively about it, I feel like it could easily flip, and that's just kind of one of the things about the mining and Litecoin that's a little bit nuanced there. So, but yeah, those are my thoughts about ossification and stuff like that.
First of all, I do appreciate that you mentioned Bitcoin's bug, and I feel like that's actually very important to like highlight that at the end of the day, these chains aren't perfect. None of them is perfect, and that's something that's great about Litecoin, is the fact that Litecoin has never experienced any bugs or issues, and that's part of it, sort of like adds to the flavor of why I even like Litecoin more. It's just never had any of that drama, downtimes and all that. And I do appreciate your explanation of why Kaspa is ossified to a point. Honestly, I do appreciate that. I think like I've learned a lot more that has cleared some of what I was previously thinking about Litecoin again. About Kaspa again. But I want to ask one question before I go to this final one that I want to talk about. Uh, Kaspa's emissions were never sped up at any point.
Right. Yeah. The emission schedule was never sped up any point. Like I said in the beginning, it was in the first 2 weeks, the emission schedule was a random based. I think it was if you found a block, it would either be 1 or 1,000. Now the point of that was because the developers had not officially put out the full release, but there was the max supply of Caspa, and the point was to for sure have the first beginning weeks of Caspa just be the highest amount of emissions, and then figure out the full schedule basically for the rest of time. And my opinion, I think the bug was actually a really good thing, because it kind of had to stop the network to fix the node issues, and then they used that time and said, all right, let's just finalize the emissions so that everyone's clear on what it is. So they changed it from a randomized block reward to 500 per block for the first 6 months.
Oh,
And then it, for the first 6 months of Caspa's history, it was 500 per block. And then after 6 months, it would start the phase where every month it would start to decrease. And so that
oh, okay.
was well established in the very, very early days. You also have to get like the background of Caspa, like the development of it and everything. Like Caspa launched
Yeah.
fully unfinished. It was given to the community, because there was a company called DAG Labs that was originally behind developing Caspa, and their whole intentions were to, in my opinion, would make decisions that I wouldn't even be here today. but because of the fact that the company went bankrupt, um, they never finished the full development. I would say 10 blocks per second is what they wanted Caspa to launch with, like be like at the start. But since they couldn't get there, they just gave it to the community and released it, and so that the community can keep it going. And it's a testament because the focus for Caspa was not smart contracts, all the big name stuff. It was fix the foundation, make the foundation the best it can be, and then build off of that foundation. And so, and now we're here today. It's survived a lot, and that to me is just a testament of its strengths. And then one of the things you said, that like Litecoin's never had a bug, and I wouldn't agree too much on that, because Litecoin is a fork of Bitcoin, so it copied the fix that Bitcoin had at one point to create Litecoin, and then just re like change the numbers, change and do a little bit of code changes to fix the block production to make it a little bit faster. So I kind of, yeah, I see your point. Like there's no bugs or anything, but Litecoin is a fork of something that existed already, pretty much, and Caspa is truly it is a fork of another type of Bitcoin network, but it's been completely rebuilt because it was originally in Golang, the language for coding, and it's transitioned to Rust as well. So it's really rebuilt the entire network to be its own thing, and the significance of the coding language being Rust is the fact that Solana is also in Rust. So that's just one of the things that the developers are kind of like transitioning to, using the Rust coding base. So Caspa is just a lot more unique in its network, that it's built from the ground up, pretty much. It's not just like a copy paste, because definitely a lot of these changes could not just be ported over to Bitcoin like just by a simple click of a button. So yeah.
Okay. First of all, I do believe that it does add to the memetics of why something should be seen as good. Again, money is very perceptional by design in terms of the way people relate to its store of value property. So yes, it does in fact matter. It does in fact matter that that network, even if it's a copy, it's just never had any downtime. Okay, this copy has never had any downtime. I mean, Bitcoin Cash is a copy, but it's had its own problems, right? It's experienced bugs. And Bitcoin Satoshi Vision, it's another copy that has even experienced 51% attacks in the past. And Ethereum Classic very infamously had the 51% attack, either 2020 or 2021, where 2020 something, where the Ethereum miners towards the end of the mining phase of Ethereum, sort of like some of them just attacked it and like created double spends, hundreds of millions of dollars gone. But Litecoin doesn't have that. So you can see all of these other copies, they can't claim this immaculate record that Litecoin has. So, I mean, being able to resist problems is not a default characteristic of being a copy of Bitcoin, but rather a testament to Litecoin's own merits, because it's just Litecoin is the copy that is not actually facing these problems. And does it even matter whether or not Litecoin is a copy? And I'm going to show you something real quick. And my question is, would you what would you say is more valuable, right? A new version of a chain, right, with a new technology of its own, a new consensus algorithm, a new hashing algorithm that no one is using, or a copy that a lot of people are using? And that is something that is actually important, because I think people just talk about Litecoin being a copy as this very easy way to slander it. But does it matter, right? I mean, this copy has, about 200,000 transactions by its own merit after all of these years, right? And it currently is sitting at its worst perception of value ever, right? People just don't like Litecoin, and it's doing all of these things. So does it really matter that it's a copy? I feel like personally, or what a lot of people would agree, is that the adoption is what matters. At the end of the day, if you copy someone's concept, right? Imagine you buy you have a profitable bus company, right? A profitable transportation business, and then you go buy the exact models of his bus to run your station, and you're getting customers. And someone else goes to invent a brand new form of mobilization that nobody's using. Your business is worth way more than that person, even though you just copied the concept. And it's just something I want to just show real quick. Two things actually, and one of it is the the transaction per day, just to just show. And by the way, if you want to show anything about Kaspa, you can go ahead and show. You can educate us a bit about some things. I don't mind. But you can see Litecoin transactions. You can see this was 2012, and you can just see generally how it's been trending upwards over time. You can see we had a higher floor here and a little higher floor here, more extended, probably in the same level of this. And then the 2019 to 2021 era, we sort of like had a higher floor and then a higher floor. And now we're at a higher floor. And you can see Doge is the one in blue, while it's been flat and just very, disorganized in its recent movement. Litecoin, the one in its red, I could just turn off the Dogecoin transaction noise so you can see the Litecoin transactions alone, now blue, has just been on this very clear path of true adoption, true network cues. And I understand that, like, network data like this can easily, get it can easily get you know it can get fabricated very easily. It's very easy to fabricate all of these things. But then you look at Litecoin, and then you look at the top payment processors like BitPay. You see, look at top payment processors like CoinGate, and Litecoin continues to dominate in these payment processors. It continues to dominate that, and that highlights the fact that Litecoin has actually been, in fact, experiencing those transaction growth that I showed you earlier, in real time, in a way that can actually be tied to, a real world increase in use, because we're nothing in BitPay in terms of, percentage transactions. BitPay is the largest P2P, Bitcoin based platform. So Litecoin came to BitPay space and we've completely dominated. We're currently number one. We've been number one for about a year and a half. It's the same. We're rising on CoinGate. We're rising in, some of these other platforms, and so that ties to Litecoin's growth. So it doesn't even matter for anything whether or not it's a copy. I feel like the general consensus is going to be around the logical fact that a copy with adoption is worth more than an original that nobody at all is using. And on the point of Litecoin and Dogecoin's merge mining, you made an absolutely intelligent and absolutely factual point that Litecoin can't rely on the merge mining alone to sustain its network, and that's true. However, I mean, we can't, take away the fact that this has actually worked very, very great so far. I mean, look at Litecoin's network growth in relation to Dogecoin, right? Look at the hash rate in relation to Dogecoin, and you can see, I'm going to just show a few things, right? Before the merge mining, you can see, how Litecoin was just, being generally better. And since the merge mining, you can see what has just happened in terms of they're just moving in perfect sync. And this is actually something that no cryptocurrency has been able to pull off. Particularly, I mean, 2017 was when we peaked last, right? And you can just look at 2017, we're about 1.5 terahashes. 2021, 270 something terahashes. And look at today, we're at about 3 petahashes. So yes, it can't be said that it's a perfect solution to the minor incentive problems logically. However, you can't take away the fact that it has in fact worked very perfectly, for the past 6-7 years. And that's something that I can actually say, at least it has that advantage over literally any other proof of work chain there. And I do love the fact that Kaspa's own approach to this is to try to use smart contracts instead, and so the miners can sort of make a lot of fees, from this smart contract transactions, and people using all of this DeFi and this dApps, which I feel has incredible potential. I'm actually very optimistic about it, and I'm looking forward to watching that work out well. If it does work out well, I believe Kaspa is definitely going to be, doing something revolutionary, something never seen before by anybody. I mean, a proof of work chain that doesn't have to rely on any form of emission schedule to sort of like keep itself running, rather, just getting the fees from, smart contracts. I feel like Litecoin does in fact have a way to do this in terms of having layer twos like drive chains, but again, I don't particularly understand how that would translate to monetary incentives for miners. But that might just be my personal incredulity. Again, I'm just an end user. I don't really understand these things from a protocol level that much. So yeah, at the end of the day, you know, uh, I just feel Caspa has um, a steep competition when it comes to trying to get its this minor incentive option that it has sorted. And that steep competition is coming from some of the most better funded projects out there. I mean, we have millions of dollars, billions of dollars in VC funds. They already have all the network effect. I mean, look at what linear Swift, right? That XRP has pretty much been begging, on their knees, begging them to integrate repo. They just went and picked Linea, a layer two solution on Ethereum. It's pretty hard to compete against that. I mean, the layer twos on Ethereum alone are a competition in the smart contract race, itself. You have Base, you have Arbitrum, you have Optimism, you have Polygon, and all of these things. And then you consider Sui, Solana. It's a very uphill battle. And as someone who naturally gravitates towards underdogs, I'm rooting for Caspa. I believe if it does this, it's going to be incredible. No one is going to be able to take it away from it that it's doing it on its own merit. I really hope it does. But yeah, that's a steep competition. And I feel like as an exciting technology, as something that is actually building a foundation that can possibly even become very solid for being a sustainable form of reliable store of value. I feel like Caspa has the prospect for that. But a lot of it is just contingent on things that can happen. And I feel like the flavor of the taste of most people, the preference of most people that are everyday Joes like me, is just going to be in storing their value in these things that are rather established. And that's just a preference thing. Okay, yeah, that's just how it appears to be right now. So I believe we can move on to the final thoughts, man. Hey, it's been a wonderful conversation. What you think?
Yeah, it's been a great combo, and yeah, it would be good to wrap up. Just Caspa is, it's new. Anything that's new is going to take time for adoption. And for your risk appetite, it seems like that's one of the reasons why you wouldn't necessarily like make a switch or anything like that, which is totally understandable. But I appreciate that you're doing your due diligence. I mean, you're looking into it. You're trying to learn more, and I just encourage you that you just keep doing your due diligence and learning more about what Caspa is doing, because I think it gives humanity something that we've never had before in a proof of work. And if we really want sound money to win, we need a system that can keep people self-sovereign at all times, and not have to rely on layer twos and centralization custodial things. Like personally, to me, like I don't really look at ETFs. Like, yes, they're good for like market cap. I don't really look at that as adoption though, because it's just like, that's just holding the coin. It's not being used. If I just firmly believe that companies that want to become a treasury for Caspa, I hope they actually find ways to actually use it in their company as well, because it can do that. It's versatile enough to be used for almost pretty much whatever need you need. But we've been seeing the same kind of growth for Caspa. Like I was saying before, I can share my screen just really quick here.
You can, you
That
can.
let me see here. So let me grab my window here. But yeah, like if you can bring the screen up.
Okay, I'm just gonna do that.
Yeah. Like if you can see here, this is the log scale chart for the transactions for Kaspa per day, and since this only goes back to 2023, it doesn't even go back to in inception. But you could see that it was in the 30,000s, and then once we had inscriptions built on the layer one, which allowed tokens and like NFTs and stuff like that, we started seeing more peaks. And then, of course, kind of came down after that died out. But rising over time to now, we're seeing for the last like 4 days, Caspa's been putting in 1 million transactions a day. And that's mainly because of layer two Casplex smart contract solutions come out, and we've been kind of seeing a huge rise in that, as well as the hash rate. Hash rate, of course, had a huge surge from inception. And again, this doesn't even go back to inception, just 2023, but huge rise all the way to exahash levels. Caspa and Litecoin have different algorithms, so just for Litecoin people out there, do not be comparing Caspa and Litecoin because of the hash rate. It's literally not.
Of course, of
comparison.
course.
Yeah, it's not a comparison at all. Like, they're different algorithms, so the cost for mining is completely different for people. So that's why it just because at Caspa has exahashes and you're at petahashes means pretty much nothing. What really means is that security budget and how hard it is. It's a 51% attack. But yeah, and now we're currently experiencing a leveling out of the hash rate at around 680 petahashes. But so we've seen similar things for Caspa in its very small life cycle of rapid growth. I mean, it's already trying to start doing more transactions than Litecoin does in a day, and it's only 4 years old. So that's pretty much like my final thoughts, and it's been a wonderful conversation about all this.
I do have my final thoughts to give if you don't mind as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So my final thoughts are, the first one. I believe the future of cryptocurrencies, is a multi-coin one. And there are a lot of Bitcoin maximalists. They keep talking about how, the future of coin money is a winner takes all game, and it's just gonna be Bitcoin and everything else is gonna die. But I feel like it's multi-coin, right? We can have a future where we can use both Bitcoin, Litecoin, Kaspa, and Doge, right? I mean, I currently use Bitcoin. I have used DMB. I have used TON. I've used this, different blockchains. I'm going to try out Kaspa as well. So, it's actually to see how that's. So, yeah, I do see a future that is multi-coin. And that is because one of the points Bitcoiners generally talk about when trying to say the future of, money is not multi-coin. It's just going to be a winner takes all future where Bitcoin wins. Is they always point to the fact that gold just dominated global money. Then they're like, oh yeah, gold dominated everything. The gold countries, they dominated the silver moneyed countries. And that's usually what they talk about and try to use that as a counter against why anything should consider itself digital silver. But I feel like, again, if you look at it, right, silver, the reason why gold was able to demonetize every other form of metal, precious metal back then, is because of stock to flow, right? Gold has a much higher stock to flow to something like silver that has a very much lower stock to flow than gold. So obviously it's just much harder, on a practical level. And because of this, gold could actually, dominate other metals that are more abundant. But in comparison, it's not the same for this ephemeral tokens, right? These monies, they all are, at least most of them, like Bitcoin, Litecoin, Kaspa, they're all hard, and their stock to flow is pretty similar in the point where people can actually predict their scarcity. So that advantage that gold did in fact have over, silver and the other precious metals just doesn't exist for Bitcoin against, these other, coins like, Litecoin and Kaspa. And another thing they usually talk about is that, people mostly use fiat currency, because and so like people only use one fiat currency. Oh, everyone's going to use one Bitcoin, no one's going to use Bitcoin and Kaspa or Bitcoin and Litecoin, because you only use US dollars, or if you're in Mexico you only use peso. But yeah, like people, there's a gun to your head to use US dollars, right? If you're in America, like at least in Nigeria, it's illegal to use US dollars as a medium of exchange. It's literally illegal, right? So there's a gun to your head to ensure that happens. And so by definition, that's going to happen, right? But it's not the same with Bitcoin. There's no gun to my head that Bitcoin is the only one I should use, beyond the, feelings of these people that are just insistent about that. So I believe, again, that just goes against their one coin to rule all thesis. And they often mention that Bitcoin has already grown so large, and I feel like, yes, that does in fact provide, it provides an uphill battle for these other monies that are trying to emerge, like Litecoin, like Kaspa. But just because it's a very steep competition doesn't mean it's not possible, right? I mean, it's the same thing I said. There's a steep competition with Caspa and the smart contracts world, but that doesn't mean there's no competition at all. That doesn't mean it's not possible, right? So and if we're going by a multi-coin future, maybe they just don't compete, right? There's nothing stopping me from spending Caspa, spending Litecoin, and spending Bitcoin whenever I want, depending on how convenient it is for me, depending on my preference. And I do see a future where, Caspa stays very, very strong enough. I mean, I'm gonna be spending Litecoin just the Caspa just the way I spend Litecoin. Why not? I like Caspa. I like what's going on with you guys. And so I believe at the end of the day, the few dominant coins, are going to coexist and grow together. So maybe a future where we can see, Bitcoin, Litecoin, and a few other proof of work coins that have grown organically, as money dominate and, sort of like take over public consciousness. And my other thought is the fact that I feel like Casper going out of after the digital silver narrative is the only problems that like Litecoiners have against Casparians, because like the idea is, I mean, at the end of the day, all right, we say in both communities that the point of what we're creating is to create a coin, a cryptocurrency that that is like has a functional relationship with Bitcoin, the same way that silver in fact has a functional relationship with gold. And what is often cited is how silver could be spent a lot. And what I just think about this is I believe on that at the end of the day, the divisibility property that physical silver has, it's just not the same with gold. And this is what Bitcoiners say, and that argument in fact has some merit to it, right? Bitcoin can be divided into 100 million you know pieces. The same with Litecoin, same with Casper can divide it into 100 different pieces. So I don't see the practical use. Besides, what I'm just going to say to that effect is the money tree layer, the main layer of the chain, just has to be usable. The fees just has to allow for transactions. And yeah, like, Casper has the extra edge of having more things that can be done on the base layer. But again, they're both useful, and that's the important thing, right? Litecoin has not grown to the point where its chain cannot handle what its adoption. And by that regard, it can be said that it hasn't gotten to the point where anything needs to expand to accept the other users, right? I mean, Bitcoin is definitely very difficult to implement Lightning with, but we know that that's not the case with Litecoin. But we're not seeing a lot of Lightning, this thing being set up, because it's just Litecoin hasn't grown to the point where the demand for those Lightning channels are there. So I feel like that's something that like Litecoin can balance out on that. It's a preference. If people, I feel like I really like the preference of things happening on chain with Casper, the fact that it can do everything on the base layer, and Litecoin would have to rely on layer twos, right? I feel like that's actually very important, particularly with reference to the ethos that we profess in the crypto space, right? The ethos of decentralization, the ethos of self sovereignty. But if we're looking at global adoption, I believe the future of cryptocurrency transactions, it's not gonna there's not gonna be a lot of back end stuff that users are going to be doing, because like, let's be honest, the whole wallet addresses and all of these things, end users are not just going to do that. It's just very difficult for people to do. So like, I believe the future of of these things as money is going to be one where these platforms are, find a way to do a lot of the background work by themselves, why they only operate with the front end of it. And I mean, at the end of the day, the users won't care at the end of the day whether or not it's done on centralized chain or it's done on decentralized chain for most people. But for someone like me, I will care. For someone like you would care, because like conceptually it matters to us, decentralization. I mean, I'll never use Lightning personally. I'll always use Litecoin on the base chain, and I believe I'll use Kaspa on the base chain as well for its functionality. But for the vast majority of people, they just don't care. And we're seeing this with the fact that a lot of people are using Base. People are using Base. It's growing. We're seeing a lot of this layer twos growing. Sui did the freeze transaction thing. A lot of people are still using it, right? It's very centralized. Look at Solana. So I don't see how so that's just what I think about that. And so I just think that's the only problem between the Litecoiners and Casparians, is the digital silver narrative. But one end, Casper leans heavily on, we can do more on the base chain, while Litecoin leans very heavily on the culture and the lore. I mean, digital silver for Litecoin, just it goes way beyond the functionality. The narrative of digital silver for Litecoin is easier to understand than that of Caspa for most people, right? And this is because if people think about gold and silver, right, most people are not really thinking about the visibility, all of that thing. People just associate them together. Gold and silver, shiny things, there's in poems, there's in music. So there's a culture of these things being intrinsically linked together. And I feel like Litecoin has a way to sit down on that culture much stronger than Caspa can, because of it's just a Bitcoin copy. People can just always think about, oh, Bitcoin is gold, copy is the silver, right? The successful copy is the silver. And just for the memetics and just for the perception of it, I feel like Litecoin, and the fact that it has 4 times faster, 4 times block it 4 times the supply, all of these things, it just sort of like grows that culture around its direct link to Bitcoin in a cultural sense, while Caspa focuses on in a more we can do more things on the layer one sense. And I think that's also great as well. May the best digital silver win. At the end of the day, it's a wonderful community, wonderful community here, wonderful community there. At the end of the day, we're just trying to push for what we believe will be the future of finance.
Yeah, yeah. There was a lot there. But at the end of the day, I really feel people are not going to care about a lot of the intricacies, like you were saying, like the copy. If it's copy, who's the founder? What did the founder say in the beginning of the days? If a bug happened in 2 weeks, if people are not going to care about that, they need a system that's just going to work for their needs and ask. And personally, I just believe Caspa is just the best out there. If we're trying to actually still battle for a money that does not have layers, that is not a layered money. Anytime you reintroduce layers to money, you just reintroduce the very things that we were supposed to be escaping from fiat. So that is the thing that's Caspa has over Litecoin, is that the goal of it is to keep users self-sovereign and keep it so seamless that you don't even realize you're self-sovereign, but you are. And that's the goal for Caspa, is to just be adopted at a mass scale, keep people self-sovereign, even if they don't even care. It doesn't matter. The way you naturally use Caspa is in the self-sovereign way. And to me, I just think having the layers only just brings more complexity to users when it comes to having to figure out how to transfer your funds to another layer, or just doing all that kind of stuff. It just adds way more complexities, increases centralization, and kind of defeats the purpose for why these systems were created. And ultimately, I think the money race is still on. No one has won. Bitcoin hasn't won. All it's won in is its value. Its value has just gone up better than most assets, but that can easily change over time. And the door is still wide open, I think, for something out there to tap into the actual money, digital sound money, peer-to-peer cash space. Lightning and people using Lightning, that's not adoption of that. And Kaspa, I just think, in my opinion, just has one of the best chances to actually tap into that space. I think money is the most important use case on Kaspa. Smart contracts and all that other kind of stuff is great. It's good for onboarding incentives, but money is the best use case because it affects everybody, because everybody in the world is using money in some way, and everybody in the world are now facing a lot more problems with using fiat. It's becoming more centralized. It's being taken over more in countries. People need an alternative, and they need an alternative that practically works similar to what already exists. And with Kaspa, you can have internet-like level speeds, proof of work on a proof of work network that's fully secure, decentralized, and scalable, solving the trilemma, which is something that has been faced by many networks, that they always have to sacrifice one of the three to be able to scale or to be able to be decentralized. They got to sacrifice something. Kaspa doesn't sacrifice any of the three to be able to actually function and work. So I do want to kind of give you the opportunity, if you're interested, to receive some Kaspa so you can actually experience it for once, if you want
Sure,
to.
sure. Send me money.
Yeah,
Send me money, bro. Send me money, bro. Appreciate that.
yeah.
Anyways, I appreciate your second final thought. I'm not gonna give a second final thought because I give a second final thought, and of course it's gonna pique your, it's gonna catch your, intellectual curiosity. You're gonna want to give us a third final thought, and then I give a third final thought, and it just goes over and on and on and on. Ultimately, I don't care about having the final say in the conversation, man. That you can have that, man. You're a wonderful person. I appreciate this conversation. This is the most healthy conversation I think I've had all year. And it's something I really appreciate. I learned a lot, honestly. I do appreciate it. So I guess we can just call the conversation finished. And